Oh, sorry, you say got it. You should all have that now.
And we got it.
Mr. Mayor, it is 5:30 p.m. and I've just received notification that we are streaming. You may begin your meeting.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. I see that we have a quorum, so I call this meeting, regular council meeting for Monday, January 9th, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. into session. As always, we begin this meeting with the land recognition statement, and I will be reading that tonight. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. Madam Clerk, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are on the approval of the agenda. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Eckhart, seconded by Councillor Kerr. Be it resolved that the agenda for the January 9th, 2023 regular meeting of council be adopted as circulated. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any discussion.
Okay, thank you. After viewing the agenda, is there any discussion from any members of council? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The vote begins with Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr. Councillor Kerr, sorry, you're on mute, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin. Oh, I think perhaps we've momentarily lost the mayor.
I just heard him step out of his office, so he'll be right back in.
Okay, I do see that Mr. Krebs has left. Perhaps he's helping the mayor with some technical difficulties. If Mr. Deputy Mayor Wink, can we permit the mayor a couple of minutes to get reconnected?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, how is my camera?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Perfect.
We're back.
Mr. Mayor, you're back. I'm waiting for your vote on approval of the agenda.
And that will be a yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our next agenda item, which is the disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof.
Okay, thank you. And after viewing the agenda, does any council member have a pecuniary interest to declare? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some note of that. Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our delegations. We do have one registered delegate here tonight. That is Mr. John DeFazio. He's here to speak to council with respect to support of chickens in the urban Pelham. I'll ask Ms. Leach just to bring the presenter in.
Okay, excellent.
I do see that we have our presenter, Mr. DeFazio, in the meeting. I would just remind the delegate that you have 10 minutes. I will have a timer going. When you reach 8 minutes, I'll give you a 2-minute warning. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Mr. DeFazio, the floor is yours, sir.
Hey, Mayor Junkin and members of council, thank you. The 1930s and 40s were hard times due to depression and World War II. Self-sustainability was encouraged. Vintage ads from those years can be found promoting vegetable gardening and the keeping of poultry, allowing families to provide for themselves. The recent pandemic has brought challenges that remind us of those times. We lost people and businesses. Food and supply shortage, illness, and isolation all make stress at an all-time high. We were told stay home to stay safe. Our world once again changed. Whether it was a need for healthy food or a mental break from stress, some people have started gardens and adopted poultry as a means of coping. We are trying to be creative and change with our world, and a bylaw that was created 40 years ago could not foresee the needs we have today. When residents called, the message about chickens was no, but the bylaw was due for an update, and if neighbors did not complain, it was not enforced. Those of us who have backyard poultry know that our birds live peaceful, happy lives. Most owners will go through great lengths to ensure our neighbors are not bothered by our birds, and we do not want to lose our pets. We think the benefits of allowing poultry under certain guidelines outnumber the risks. I'll talk about 10 benefits. Number 1, poultry make wonderful pets. They recognize their names, come when called, and love to hang out with their caregivers. They provide hours of entertainment and stress relief. Like dogs and cats, they are a domesticated animal that were bred to live alongside humans. The reason chickens are considered livestock is that they provide us with eggs and meat. Number 2, they rival opossums for eating ticks at about 80 per hour. They also eat flea eggs, mosquito larvae, and other unwanted insects. Chickens will even kill and eat mice as they are omnivores. Number 3, they reduce household waste by eating table and garden scraps, as well as some weeds. Number 4, home-raised eggs are much more nutritious than store-bought. Sun exposure and natural variety of their diet give their eggs maximum vitamins and minerals. Number 5, caring for them educates us on where our food comes from and the work and dedication that goes into it. Number 6, they foster a connection with nature, animals, and the ecosystem. Number 7, it allows families to be more self-sustained in uncertain times. Number 8, small flock owners support the biodiversity of heritage breeds versus the hybrids of factory farms. Number 9, backyard poultry owners support local businesses when they buy feed, supplies, and building material. Number 10, chicken manure, when buried in small amounts, is a valuable soil amendment that increases the quality of the soil. Now, for 3 perceived risks. The first one is noise. Female chickens spend most of their days making quiet clucks that neighbors would never hear. After they lay an egg, they do have a louder vocalization that lasts seconds or up to a minute. This can occur anytime during daylight hours. It's no louder than a dog's bark. From dusk to dawn, they sleep. Number 2, perceived risks. Smell. A coop and run with a reasonable number of birds and maintained daily should not be smelled by neighbors or owners. A daily scoop of droppings and fresh scented bedding will look after smells. Number 3, wildlife. Wildlife in urban areas already exists. Where you have prey like wild rabbits, squirrels, and chipmunks, the larger predators naturally come to eat them. Cities who do not allow chickens have rats and wildlife the same as any other city. St. Catharines does not yet allow poultry, but has a rebate program for homeowners who hire an exterminator for rats. Some sources for attracting rats and other wildlife are garbage that sits outside, sites of new construction, feeding wild birds and other wildlife, the use of bone meal, blood meal, and corn gluten fertilizers, grass seed, messy yards, vegetable gardens, wood and brush piles, picnic areas, etc. Control of wildlife comes from education and control of attractants, not banning of all the above or pets. For responsible owners, it is apparent right away that wildlife proofing the chicken housing is a must. Our findings are that once secure housing is provided and food is controlled, wildlife quickly loses interest. We think that a permit or license system could ensure proper housing of poultry and fix any pre-existing issues. Just like pools were once dangerous, we found a permit system and regulations that work. Other cities have educational videos on poultry care as a requirement for obtaining a license. If issues arise with an owner, a license can be revoked. A Facebook group has been formed with over 100 supporters. If urban chickens are approved, this group can continue to provide support and educational information on the keeping of backyard chickens. As poultry owners in Pelham, we care about our property as much as anyone else. It is our experience that owning poultry goes along with other property improvements like gardening, planting bushes, and building a privacy fence. Sharing eggs and letting neighbors visit makes for good neighbors. So in conclusion, we are here today to ask that council pass an allowance for urban poultry in Pelham, or at the very least, start by working with a few interested families in a pilot project to see if it can work. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that presentation, Mr. DeFazio. I will now open it up to Councillor to see if there is any questions to Mr. DeFazio on his presentation. And I see Councillor Olson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. DeFazio, thank you for your presentation, and your group has sent me lots of letters, which I've read every one of them. It reminds me of when we had chickens on the farm, and that was one of my chores, was take care of the chicken house. And in the winter time in Alberta, that sometimes wasn't the best place. But yeah, I only have one reservation, I think, about the whole thing, plus a few other ones. But you said that you would participate in the writing of an agreement, I guess. Let's call it an animal husbandry agreement. You would be willing to participate in that. And I believe you said that you'd like to have like a pilot project as well.
Mr. DeFazio?
All right, through Mr. Mayor, to answer Councillor Olson's question is, yes, we are willing to participate in any type of process that would help get approval. So whether that is a pilot project or anything else related to more in-depth discussion of our reasons, yes.
Councillor Olson?
Yes, thank you. To get to my concern, I'm concerned about avian flu. That's one of the things that I'm concerned about. And we have a sizable agricultural business industry here in this area, and I'm concerned about that. And I know that I know we haven't got into what the agreement would look like, the husbandry agreement would look like, but it's, a lot of these things depend on being close to animals and close to wild animals, and this is important to us as a community. The comparison has been made that these are like other forms of pets, but we don't have too many dog farms or any cat farms around. So I'd like to see that addressed in some manner. I'm sure it's been addressed other places, but I'd like to have that addressed and probably to the satisfaction of our agricultural community. So I'm pleased to say it here that you're going to participate in consultations here.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I will be, of course, reminding the rest of Council that we will be doing a further debate discussion on this presentation at 10.2.4 later on in the agenda. Any other questions to Mr. DeFazio on his presentation? Not seeing any. I would just like to comment that I believe all councillors received videos. I believe Pam would correct assumption that Pam is your wife, and you certainly do have quite a elaborate flock and coop on your place, on your residence. May I ask, how long have you had chickens on your residence?
All right, Mr. Mayor, I think it was May 2021 that we first got chickens, so coming up on 2 years.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. One last time, any other questions or comments on the presentation? Not seeing any. So Mr. DeFazio, thank you for appearing before council tonight and presenting us with your presentation. Thank you.
I apologize, Mr. Mayor, can I add one thing about the avian
Yes.
flu? I wasn't sure if that was a question or just, a comment, but, we shared the same concern because we don't want our chickens to become ill. So we after getting advice from other people, we tried to take some precautions from that. So for example, we took down all of our bird feeders so that we wouldn't attract as many birds during this time. Because the flu needs to come from a source. So we were trying to eliminate the source as much as possible to reduce the risk. And so we were aware of that potential issue and tried to mitigate it as best as we could.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Again, thank you for your presentation. And like I say, we will be addressing this issue in detail later on in the agenda.
Great, thanks.
Okay, and now I shall turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that council receive the delegation from John DeFazio with respect to support for chickens in urban Pelham, and that council receive the written petition entitled Petition of Supporters for Chickens in Urban Pelham with 34 signatures for information, and that council receive the electronic petition entitled Supporters of Urban Poultry in Pelham, Ontario, submitted through change.org with 614 signatures as of January 3rd, 2023 for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the presentation? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. To you, Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next item on the agenda, which is the adoption of minutes. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Niznik, seconded by Councillor Eckhart. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as circulated, printed and read. 1, RC 22/2022, regular council, December 19, 2022. To you, Mr. Mayor, to call for any errors or omissions.
Okay, thank you. After viewing the minutes, is there any councillor that has noted any errors or omissions in the minutes? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The vote begins with Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. To you, Mr. Mayor, that brings you to the request to lift consent agenda items for separate consideration. If any councillor wishes to lift an item to consider separately, perhaps to amend the resolution attached thereto, they may now indicate that to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. After viewing the agenda items, is there any item that any councillor would like to lift at this time? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. That does bring you to the consent agenda. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Wink. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the January 9th, 2023 council agenda be received and that the recommendations contained therein be approved. To you, Mr. Mayor, council may discuss any of those items. Would you like to go through them in block?
Yes, let's do as we usually do, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. The first item for discussion would be 8.1 and 8.2. That is with respect to the recommendations arising from committee. It's specifically the December 12th planning meeting. To you, Mr. Mayor, if there's any discussion on those items.
Thank you. Any counselor wish to discuss items 8.1 or 8.2 on their own? Not seeing any hands, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. The next would be items 8.3.1 and 8.3.2, and that's staff reports of routine nature or for information or action. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Excellent, thank you. 8.2, 8.31, 8.32. Any further discussion? Let's go to Councilor Wink first.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. 8.3.1 implications of Bill 23. Just a couple of questions for staff. The additional dwelling units that's being discussed within Bill 23. Does this mean that the town policies pertaining to secondary dwelling units are now negated, or will some of those remain in place?
And who would like to have a shot at this? I see Ms. Luak, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wink. The permissions remain in place. The only requirements that have changed are where we don't permit 3 units as of right, which the second dwelling unit provisions generally do, or where we may have required more than 1 parking space for a unit. But the requirements with respect to floor areas and location on properties that were set by council still are in effect.
Okay, thank you for that. One other question, Mr. Mayor, if I may. Subdivision and part lot control, no longer is there a requirement to hold a public meeting. However, can the municipality still request a public meeting on certain items?
Ms. Luak.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wink again. We may be able to put a requirement in our official plan. We'll be doing a housekeeping amendment that will deal with the implications of both Bill 109 and Bill 23 in the near future. And so we could put in a requirement. In most instances, there is a zoning bylaw amendment required to permit the uses in a draft plan of subdivision. And so the requirement for a public meeting will take place with respect to that application, whether there's the need for it with the even though it's not required with the subdivision.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Olson.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. LaRock. I was wondering, it appears that the parkland dedication is going to decline with the new subdivisions. Is that true? And if so, it makes the parklands that we have even more valuable to us. Is that a true statement?
Ms.
Through
LaRock.
you, Mr. Mayor. Typically, the town of Pelham charges parkland dedication at the percentage rates, of 2% for commercial uses and 5% for residential uses. The changes that took place with respect to Bill 23 really relate to larger developments where it's a higher ratio of land. And so that portion is not expected to affect us. Where we will more so see an effect is that we have to allocate 60% of our parkland dedication funds each year.
Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad you mentioned the 60%. I was going to ask the treasurer, with the first time we talked about this, there were obviously financial implications for the town and our development charges and the other things. And I was just wondering if this will be accounted for in our budget when we get into that over the next few days.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the new bill is not part of our budget right now because it just received approval in December.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions to either the senior planner or to the treasurer on this Bill 23? Not seeing any. If a question of my own, perhaps one of the biggest changes is going to be the no appealing of the Committee of Adjustments. To you, Senior Planner, Ms. LaRock, we have had, I don't know if the term quite a few is the appropriate term, but I believe in the last term of council, there was quite a few of the Committee of Adjustments that did get appealed. Am I right there or not?
You're correct, Mr. Mayor. We did have several appeals on both consents and minor variances during the last term of council. And the only opportunity for those appeals at this point would be if it were appealed by the applicant, by the province, or by the town.
Okay. Also okay, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you to Mr. Mayor. Just recall memory, I believe we had 2 appeals which were from members of the public with respect to minor variance applications. And I do recall 1 consent application being appealed by the developer during the last term.
Excellent.
That's what I recall.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, thank you. That's my only question at this time. Any other questions on the 831? Oh, I see Councilor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just moving on to 8.3.2 Town Hall Building Update. What are the implications if the addition is not substantially complete by February 28th?
And we'll go to the Director of Public Works, Mr. Marr. Is that your, or do you want me to go to the CAO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I believe the treasurer may want to comment on this with respect to the grant and the timing on that.
Oh, okay, thank you. To the deputy, to the treasurer.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I reached out to the funder, the FedDev, to say that, we needed extra time. We had some delays that were out of our control. One was the issue with the soil that we had to remove, and that caused a bit of delay. They were very understanding, so they have granted us a grant extension to March 31st, and we will be able to meet that timeline.
Oh, thank you. Councillor?
That's great. Thank you very much.
I know, just as an aside, that Councillor Eckert has mentioned that he's very good drywaller if we do need him. Any other comments on the town hall building situation? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
To you, Mr. Mayor, I see Councillor Olson has his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Olson. Go ahead, sir.
That's through you, Mr. Mayor, back to 8.3.1, if I might.
Sure.
I understand that we're going to be made whole on some of the charges that arise out of Bill 23. Do we have communications or anything with the province to that effect? Because Minister Clark said that we would be made whole, and I wonder if we're keeping track of the extra costs.
Thank you. To the treasurer, Ms. Quinlan Murphy, any communication?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, no, I have not received any communication.
Not as of yet, then.
Not as of yet, no.
Okay, thank you. Councillor?
I just want to be sure we're collecting the cost for future collection. That's my aim.
Okay. Any other questions? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The next category would be the information correspondence items, Mr. Mayor, and that's 8.5.1 all the way to 8.5.7. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to you.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments from any councillor on what on these letters of correspondence? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The last category would be 8.7.1, and that's committee minutes for information. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on 8.871 from any council member? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The vote begins with Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Counselor Kerr,
Yes.
Mayor Duncan.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Okay, Mr. Mayor, your next item on the agenda is with respect to councillor reports. We do have a councillor report tonight from Councillor Hildebrandt regarding the update on the Niagara Region Electricity Plan Integrated Regional Resource Plan, IRRP. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and to you, Councillor Hildebrand, you have the floor.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the fact that I represent the town of Pelham at these meetings. The report attached to the agenda is a summary of the Niagara Region's 20-year electrical plan. The comments I'm going to make tonight are my views based on the meetings that I have attended and today's design climate related to targets of carbon zero and carbon neutral designs. Electricity next to water is an essential component of today's society. Electricity has been an enabler for development, for social welfare, for healthcare improvements, and its role is only becoming increasingly important and critical. Over the last number of years, the use of Ontario's clean electricity sources as a way to reduce dependence on fossil fuels has been what I call a disruptor event. It has been a step change, not a gradual change. Even recent planning documents have Enbridge Gas as a commenting agency, with no comments from Hydro One or Niagara Peninsula Energy. In my view, something is missing. Why do I say this? Let's look at the report for 1145 Pelham Street as an example. I believe gone are the days when these apartment building designs will even have the need for a natural gas connection. If it's designed looking forward to zero carbon or carbon neutral, the natural gas hot water tank, the natural gas furnace boiler for heating will be replaced by electrical hot water tanks, heat pump technology, or the equivalent for heating. Plus, the building will have electrical vehicle charging stations. Even from an economic standpoint, this is what I believe has become less costly and more efficient. From a sales or rental option, I believe it's considered desirable as well. The electrical load that this new design building will impose on the existing local grid and transformer will be significant, especially since it is an infill development. Then add 105 Welland Road, all in the same vicinity off the same electrical line and the same grid. When you look at the present electrical designs for these properties, the electrical power comes off Pelham Street from a single pole mounted transformer, one for each property, just like you see in the country. In my view, the existing buildings on the property way back when had a maximum load of 20 amp service, which was sufficient in the past. With these new building apartment designs, my estimate is that it's now at least 10 times the electrical load requirements, which is why I'm asking these types of questions. ISO participation to prepare the regional plan was held by Zoom, and registration was very similar to the town's procedure over the last number of years. Many people attended, but I could not identify anyone else from the Niagara region at these meetings. Some participants, especially outside of Toronto, reported power supply and quality issues similar to what we're experiencing. I did question ISO after the plan was issued on the fact that, and their reply was that they had working groups of the local 7 local distribution companies and did not address my attendance question. It seems as though everyone is just used to connecting up to the local utility pole, and there always has been enough power. Although it's not stated in the plan issued by ISO, I have a confirmation email that the transformer at the Allenburg Transformer Station, which has a direct 230,000 kVA electrical feed line from the Adam Beck generating station that feeds Pelham's transformer stations, will be replaced in 2024. Pelham has 2 local distribution companies, or LDCs. Each has 2 transformer stations. NPEI has one on Station Street and North Pelham. Hydro One has on Cataract Road South, which serves Fond Hill, and one west of E.L. Crossley High School, which services Fenwick in the area. This is the one that has had the feed issues from the Allenberg transformer, and the one that has had significant low voltage and 600 volt three-phase power imbalance, which also has occurred at the Meridian Center. Hydro One, just before the new year, did make some upgrades at the transformer just west of E.L. Crosley and added some capacitors in Fenwick. It remains to be seen whether their improvements have resolved electrical quality issues in Fenwick. I hope what I considered a major disruptor on how we provide heat for living and power for transportation is taken into consideration, and together we ensure that ISO and our local LDCs get the information and feedback they need to properly plan for the future, which is upon us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you for that report, Councillor Hildebrand. Any questions or comments from any member of council on Councillor Hildebrand's report? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk. Oh, you're muted, Madam Clerk.
Welcome to
Mr.
our
Mayor.
world.
Yes. To you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Niznik, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. Be it resolved that council receive the update report from Councillor Hildebrandt regarding the Niagara Region Electricity Plan Integrated Regional Resource Plan for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any discussion.
Okay, thank you. Once again, any discussion, any further discussion on the report? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Kerr,
Yes.
Councillor Niznik, Yes. Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. So, Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your first staff report, and I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Eckhart, seconded by Councillor Kerr. Be it resolved that council receive report 2023-09 supplemental report for applications for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment 15 Highway 20 East for additional information as it pertains to file numbers OPAM 01-2022 and AM-03-21, and that council receive report 22-181 recommendation for official plan and zoning bylaw amendments 15 Highway 20 East, and that council direct planning staff to prepare the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for council's consideration. You, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any discussion by councillors on this 10.2.1 on the supplementary report and the further information that we had on this application? Councillor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the senior planner. Looking at the planning application report and the sketch with respect to the subject site, there's a large easement off to the right of the property, and it appears that there's some encroachments on that easement, some with a parking lot and some with the building itself. It was, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was my understanding that easements could not, or encroachments could not happen on easements. Is that a correct statement or an incorrect statement?
To you, Ms. Lewak.
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wink. That easement it's a town easement. There's a sewer that runs underneath it. And the encroachments that you see on the site plan have been reviewed by our public works staff, and they've agreed that they are acceptable. My understanding is that those encroachments are now limited to portions of asphalt parking spots and movable curbs, so that there are no permanent structures that would be a problem in the event that we needed to get in and get access to that utility.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to make a few comments, if I may, Mr. Mayor. So I'm disappointed that this application is exactly the same as the original submission. The developer previously indicated that he wanted to work with the town and the residents of Kinsman Court to come up with an amiable plan but that is not the case. In August 22nd, the developer agreed to reduce 2 units to adhere to the new zoning bylaw of 1.25 parking spaces per unit. This has now been recanted. This proposal has asked for minor variances in all aspects of the site plan. It has now come to light that the site cannot accommodate delivery vehicles due to the height of the cantilevered area, and there is a lack of turning radius for trucks. The residents of Kinsman Court have requested that they be included in discussions regarding logistics of moving trucks, as well as clarification of the construction parking plan. It has been my position all along that I would support the wishes of the residents of Kinsman Court. That said, they have agreed to the development as a best case scenario, fearing for what might happen if this was turned down and there would be another application put forward. I personally do not agree with the massing of this building, but will reluctantly agree with planning staff's recommendations.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Councilor Wink. I now go to Councilor Eckert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to piggyback on Councilor Wink's comments, I have had meetings along with Councilor Wink with the residents at Kinsman Court. They have some legitimate concerns, and they're my concerns as well. And they go around the site plan. And it has a lot to do with the access to that lot off of Kinsman Court, and not only for construction vehicles for a period of time, but also the placement of the in-ground garbage containers. And now with this concern about delivery vehicles, we're wondering if the danger exists that this gateway into the back parking lot is going to be used for far more than just garbage removal on a semi-weekly basis. As Councilor Wink has said, for the lesser of two evils, I'm prepared to support this as well, but I do have some concerns going forward, and I think it needs to be monitored very closely.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Perhaps I'll turn to the senior planner. Have you had any updated conversations with the developer, or any other comments that you would like to make at this time on the application?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to other vehicles other than waste collection vehicles using the service access off of Kinsman Court, that's not expected to be a frequent occurrence. It would be in the event that, an individual is perhaps moving and requires a larger truck than could be accommodated on site. So it's not expected to be a daily or even a weekly or a frequent occurrence of any type, but it is another option. As everybody knows, Highway 20 is a very busy road, and with the traffic that's in that area and the hill and the light and all of that, it's really not feasible to have vehicles stop and put on the four ways and unload along that area. So Kinsman Court is another option, a safer option in the event that and in the event that that is needed. And again, not expected to be a regular occurrence.
Okay, thank you for that, Madame Levac. Any other, I'll go back to Councilor Eckert.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the senior planner. One of the concerns is that with these in-ground garbage containers, that trucks, there may not be room for trucks to enter in there and back actually right into the parking lot because of the location of those containers. The concern then is that they will abandon the use of those type of containers for bins and then relocate them to another area. Does the senior planner have any information about that or any indication that that's a possibility?
Ms. Locke?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there doesn't appear to be any issue with a private waste collection vehicle accessing those MOLOC containers. They have been designed and reviewed by MOLOC as part of the site plan submission, and they regularly design these so that they can be picked up by private contractors. And in the event that the property owner wanted to take advantage of regional curbside collection, they'll only pick up to 12 units anyhow. So there really isn't the ability to accommodate that many units through those sort of rollout containers on site. It's also a fairly constricted site, as everyone can see, and there really wouldn't be a location on site that would be able to accommodate that number of containers.
Councilor Acker?
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Councilor. Any other questions, comments? Not, Councilor Nesnick.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question with for the town planning. So I can see the containers on there, but it looks like it's on green space. So help me understand why that's not a paved looking area for those MOLOC containers to be situated on, so that the truck can back right up and then pick them up and dump them, or however they dump them or vacuum them out or whatever they do.
Ms. Locke?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Niznik. The truck itself, it is possible for the containers to be located with landscaping around them as opposed to concrete. The truck actually has a lifting system that will reach over and pick the contents of those MOLOCs up and put it into the back of the truck. So it doesn't need to pull right up and be on top of them. The truck's designed to reach over and lift out of those MOLOC containers.
Thank you. So just one more question. So just with the zero setback, so this is after there's an allowance per wide roads widening from the Niagara region. So that's not happening or has not happened, if I'm correct. But once that zero setback happens, those snow plows, when they throw that snow, that's going to be smashing right into that building if there's no setback. So would the sidewalk then go in front of the building on the other side of where the pink is showing now, which is the road widening?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's
Yeah.
correct. There's roughly a 6.5 meter distance between the traveled portion of the road and the actual front of this building. This building will be separated from the traveled portion of the road by a boulevard, a 1.5 meter sidewalk, additional boulevard space, and then the road widening, which is more than 2 meters wide. That road widening will be used rather than for, traveled road. It's going to be used for landscaping, street trees and shrubs and things like that.
Okay, so there's no plan for that to be actually widened as a road.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, not at this time.
Okay. And then my final question, thank you, for Shannon, through you, Mr. Mayor. Will vehicles be allowed to turn as they exit from there? Will they be allowed to turn right onto Highway 20, left onto Highway 20, sorry, going down the hill and crossing traffic there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe that the region has asked for any restrictions to turning movements at this time. And so people exiting the property will have the option to turn left or right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other questions on this report? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Eckhart, seconded by Councillor Kerr. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2023-09 supplemental report for applications for official plan and zoning bylaw amendments 15 Highway 20 East for additional information as it pertains to files OP-AM 01-2022 and AM 03-2021, and that Council receive report 2022-181 recommendation for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 15 Highway 20 East, and that council direct planning staff to prepare the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for council's consideration. Mr. Mayor, was there any other discussion or shall I call the vote?
Let me go around the camera one more time. Is there any other questions or comments? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Kerr,
Yes.
Councillor Niznik,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next staff report. And it's a motion being put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Niznik. Be it resolved that council receive report 2023-0119 clerks 2022 to 2026 Agricultural Advisory Committee for information, and that council for the town of Pelham confirm and establish the Agricultural Advisory Committee with the terms of reference as recommended by staff. And that council directs staff to seek applications from interested residents for the advisory committee for appointments in January 2023, with applications considered in closed session, with appointments to occur in open session. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any comments on this report concerning the Agricultural Advisory Committee? Councilor Olson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I think this is going to be a valuable addition to the town. Looking at the terms of reference, there's a danger in being too specific about things, but I had a couple of suggestions to add to this. First of all, one of the items on there is nutrient management. I believe that is a provincial responsibility, but I would like to add something along the line of promoting and encouraging research that focuses on improving crop yields and soil health. And by way of doing that, establish a relationship with the Vineland Research, Brock, and probably with Guelph as sources for information. Secondly, I'd like to see us promote the jobs in agriculture, and the suggestion there would be that the committee be responsible for managing and putting on a jobs in agricultural job fair at the MCC every spring. So before crops go in, and bring on youth to work on the farms and help with the education. I also would like to see it we're promoting agricultural uses. I'd like to see us promote micro businesses, small and medium enterprises, and that type of thing within this committee. And I don't want to broaden it out too much because, as I said, it's difficult to establish it. But I'd like to make sure that we have a couple of specific responsibilities for the committee to deliver on during their term.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, Councilor Olson, are you done?
I'm finished.
Okay, thank you, sir. So before we move on to discuss any of that, I believe, Madam Clerk, we will need I take it, Councilor Olson, that you think of these as amendments.
I would, if that's what you prefer, Mr. Mayor.
Madam Clerk, obviously, we value your judgment here. Those would have to be amendments and a seconder. Am I correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's two ways that council can proceed. Either council can decide to make an amendment stating that staff are to revise the terms of reference, including those various points. I have noted them down, and approve the terms of reference as amended in that respect. However, council would not have the opportunity to re-review those terms of reference. Staff would just make those changes and we would post them. Council could also refer back to staff if council believes those are substantial changes, and staff can bring a report back perhaps on January 30th or February 6th. I would look to the CAO to see if he has a preference.
Okay, Mr. CAO, any comments on this?
I don't like to discourage innovation and creative thinking. But look, staff put forward what is our recommendation to you? And our recommendation is not that this change. This will be only maybe the third agricultural advisory committee in all of Niagara. And we'd really like to see, assuming it is the will of council that it be created, for sake of argument, assuming that you're supportive, I really think we ought to let it sort of get its feet under it and go forward. And then maybe a year from now, 2 years from now, look at making some amendments to its terms of reference. The terms of reference are relatively straightforward and are in line with agricultural advisory committees elsewhere, which is where we went to for inspiration. A number of those are substantive changes. Right now, we don't have economic development in the current strategic plan. We may or may not in the next one. That'll be up to you. But I wouldn't want to put the cart before the horse. So, and if, you know, we do start holding job fairs, that is a fairly significant undertaking for staff. And we weren't anticipating this group having a particularly large budget to start off. We're hoping to get the thing off the ground, and then, and I think there are a couple of policy ideas that both planning and possibly several of you have in mind for this new group, assuming it gets approved. So my recommendation, not just mine, but frankly that of all of staff who've touched this on this, is to sort of consider it as it is proposed, let the group get created, see what level of interest there is in the community. I think there are a number of people who are going to want to volunteer their time and talents, and then sort of see how it goes for the first year. Let it walk, and then let's talk about having it run. But first steps, like any new creation, will be wobbly, and we kind of like to see where it goes. So now that being said, if you'd like further report back, I would take the later of the dates, the end of February. That'll give us some time to look at other, I can tell you, I've read a number of other terms of reference, and we're now getting beyond the ones we used as source material, which isn't to say we can't do it. It's well within your power to approve this. But I think we need to give some budgetary consideration. And then we may also need to consider where we're going to assign some of those items within the corporation, because the purpose of an advisory committee, to remind everyone, is to give you advice on policy areas, particularly around land use, but around general policy. It's not actually to do or deliver on items. That still remains a staff function. So you may receive advice from an agriculture advisory committee, but ultimately, if we're going to be doing things, that's still got to come back to staff and budgets. So that's why we've kind of suggested the structure that we have in the report before you. With that commentary, I'll stop talking.
Okay, thank you, Mr. CEO. Before I go to other members of council, I would just like to, if I could throw my 2 cents in. I read the terms of reference, and I thought that it was I liked it. It was clean, it was simple, and when I envisioned this committee, I was thinking that they would be commenting on and advising on any forthcoming legislation, bylaws that were going to be coming from town staff and being discussed in council. That's what I saw this committee doing, whether it's on hoop houses, whether it's on land use, what have you. So I myself, I was quite happy that the terms of reference were quite simple, quite straightforward. Obviously, Council Olson thinks that it should be a little meat added to it. I'm anxious to hear what other members of council are thinking at this time. And I see Councillor Kerr, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In reading through some things, a couple things I noticed with it. And it was more to do with representation on the group. 6 residents who were involved in the agriculture industry, including, and there's 8 categories there. Now, the other flip side is that having been a specialist for the provincial government in the area of fruit production, a tender fruit grower is not an apple grower. So we have a substantial planting of apples within the town of Pelham, but there's no apple grower considered to be represented on this group as separate from the others. Small fruit growers, we have substantial pick your own, be it raspberries, be it et cetera, strawberries, take your pick. I think what we've done here is almost over dictated or specifying who these people will be in creating some kind of pigeonholes that's maybe we really didn't want to have. I don't mean this in a negative way to anyone, but just I deal with this all the time. And so that's really just kind of my observation. I think it's a highly valuable group. I think it's important. And to look at it, and we kind of created the broad category. If I'd say it as a livestock farmer, that can cover a whole range of livestock, yet we've individualized whether it's a grape grower or a tender fruit grower, or et cetera, et cetera. So if you see what I'm going at, is almost, it needs to be made up of cash crop farmers, fruit growers, which encompasses everybody, livestock, which encompasses a larger group. That's all I'm trying to get across on this. I'm all for it, and I concur with the CAO. Adding too many things to it at this time, I'm trying to reduce it. Spend a year, get it under our belts, and see where it goes is going to be the way to go. Especially if we look at this as having input into things that are not just rural related. This may be a group that has to be involved in other items where there are agricultural commodities being looked at within the urban environment that may need some assistance and also some comment. So that's really what I'm looking at in terms of I'm all for an ag committee. I just think that don't bind us. You can write a giant categorization of everything. It's almost you create yourself by creating the devil with too many details rather than leaving it open.
So Councillor Kerr, you're thinking then that we should be leaving the representation in more general terms, maybe agricultural backgrounds or what?
I don't mind hitting, you can generalize, as I said, you could take a tender fruit grower, a grape grower, an apple grower, and a small fruit grower. They're all fruit growers. It just doesn't, you don't have to pigeonhole people, I guess is where I'm looking at it. It's like saying livestock, if we wanted to be picky, we would say we would want a dairy farmer versus a hog operator versus a poultry producer versus, if you're following my line of thought, I'm just saying, let's keep this open as we can. But the part I saw was 6 residents who were involved in the industry, including, there were 8 things listed, but they want 6 residents. So
Okay.
that was where I kind of going, have we created too many columns? And in fact, just generalized.
Okay, let's, any comments on that, Mr. CAO?
Well, there are 2 ways to look at that. I take Councillor Kerr's point and see, he has the level of expertise that in fact, none of us on staff do, right? This is Exhibit A as to why you go to search for a committee of this nature. But look, it's the 7 of you who ultimately vote on and decide on the membership. So on the one hand, we can make the changes. On the other hand, it's not necessary because we don't know who's going to apply. We're speaking in the abstract, and until you actually get applications, it's just a theoretical exercise. So there may be some benefit in, maybe we got too specific. We were trying to, in a sort of a shotgun approach, make sure we got most sectors of agriculture, but clearly got some of that wrong, which, because I think a majority of the senior staff here are urbanites. So I'll I'm Exhibit A of the problem, right? And we're trying to make sure we have coverage in an area in which maybe we're not all strong. Either I think council should endorse Councillor Kerr's recommendations for a reduction for those modifications to language, or not do it. And either way, we'll get applicants from whoever is interested, and then you can ensure that there's reasonable representation across the different types of agriculture that make up the diverse agricultural world that is known as Pelham. So that's the good news. Happy to make the changes. I apologize where we fell flat. But that being said, you're the ones who make the choice, and we don't yet have any applicants for something you haven't yet approved. So this is also this type of thing we can fix in a year or 2 years after we're, to reiterate the walk before we run. But I also think there's some some fair critique within Councillor Kerr's comments. So perhaps that's something you wish to do now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see Councillor Nesnick.
Yeah, so I agree, I think, with the Councillor Kerr's comments. So I think a simple, just a little reword, or if you can just, you could just reword it to say 6 residents who are involved in the agricultural industry, which may include, and then the list of those folks, and then leave it at that. And so if you put the which may include, then that might be 1 grape grower, 1 farm person, and it then just see who does apply and live with it for that. So if you just kind of just semantic reword it, I think it'll be great. I think it's really well written. I agree with our CAO that I think we do want to just kind of let it lie the way it is and see how it unfolds. It's an exciting time for sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nesnick. Councillor Eckert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, just to follow up on Councillor Nesnick. The nice thing is, as you said, Mr. Mayor, council will select the members of this committee. And with Councillor Kerr's obvious expertise in this area, and also Councillor Olson, we can benefit from that when we make our decisions. So if we do a simple change like Councillor Nesnick said, I think that satisfies as far as I'm concerned, and so we leave it as it is. In regards to Constable Olson's comments and additions, I'm worried that if we make it too onerous in the first year, it's a recipe for failure. So I'm in favor of getting this thing off the ground. And then those excellent suggestions by Councillor Olson could come into effect in year 2 and 3, and however, seeing as how this goes in its budget and things like that. So,
okay, thank you for those. Thank you for those comments. So, Councillor Kerr, we'll go back to you. So, if we just make it more, make the changes that Councillor Nesnick did, make it a little less specific. Do you think that will get us where we want to be?
I think we can. I just have one question. Does every person who operates a greenhouse in the town of Pelham belong to the Pelham Greenhouse Grower Group?
No, they do not.
So are we potentially excluding somebody by saying you have to be a member of a greenhouse, that particular greenhouse group, rather than just saying a greenhouse grower?
And
I'm just looking at for floriculture, vegetables in the works. Similarly, if you're going to have something like that, I don't want to offend vegetable growers, and we know there are a number. Both you and I, Mayor, Mr. Mayor, know someone who grows a lot of vegetables and has for 50 years, as well as apples and things like that. So I don't want it perceived when it's advertised for people to apply that some groups are excluded.
Yes.
So I think that's all I'm worried about, is that somebody feels that well, I'm a cucumber grower, but I'm not a part of the Pelham Greenhouse Grower Group. You know,
Yeah.
Does that mean I'm not supposed to apply?
Yes.
That's all.
Well, I think that comes back to Councillor Nesnick then, is we just make it a lot more general, and the bottom line is, when we do get the applications in, hopefully we will go through them, and as a council we can make sure that there is a good mix. Of course, we only get that done if people apply. So I think the more general we are, I think that's maybe name 1 or 2 categories, and I don't even know if we need to do that. Just interested people of agricultural operations. I don't know what the correct wording would be, but I mean, the wording itself was great, except let's just make it a little general, as Councilor Nesnick mentioned. Councilor Kirk?
I'm wondering whether the term and whether we want to also, are those involved in commercial agricultural? Or do we want, quote, someone who perceives that they're a homeowner fruit grower? You understand where I'm going? That's, I mean, I'm digging too deep into this. I can see it with a number of
But at the
people,
same time, we don't want, I really don't think the purpose of this committee is to have somebody that has 5 apple trees as opposed to somebody who's got 100 acres. Right?
Wholeheartedly agree, but just so you're aware, I could have 50 grapevines and sell and have a marketing board license. And I only have 50 grapevines versus a guy who's got 150 acres.
Yes. Well, like I say, we would decide that though when we had the applications come in.
Sure.
Yeah. Councilor Olson, I see your hand.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I just make a comment about I think an organization like this, it should have some kind of a target, and it should have some things that we have expectations as members of council for. One of the biggest chores they have right now is employment. And if we had a job fair, that would serve to and heighten the interest in our local youth and everything for farming. The second thing I would like to suggest is that Rural Affairs, Ontario Rural Affairs, they set down they stipulate in one of their publications what an agricultural committee should look like, and it looks suspiciously like the one that we have in front of us right now. So I would urge us to have a look at that as well.
Well, Councilor Olson, if you want to put these things on an amendment, and we'll see if we can second it or whatever. You've heard numerous council members are pretty happy with the terms of reference that were drawn up by staff. And I don't see a lot of appetite for adding more, but I could be wrong. If you want to make an amendment and have a seconder, and we can discuss this as an amendment, it's up to you, sir.
Well, I'd move that we defer it for further study and report for a meeting, I believe it was the end of January or February from the CAO. That's what my motion would be.
Okay, well, I certainly won't support that motion, but we will definitely put it, so you're putting that forward as a motion, Councillor?
Yes, I am.
Okay, is there a seconder to Councillor Olson's motion to defer until what time, Councillor Olson?
I believe the CAO had a date there of was it February or?
Mr. CAO?
Well, depending on the nature of what's being sought, we could bring something back for the last meeting here in January. I'm sure we can manage amendments to the language, although I also think you can manage those tonight as far as qualifications go, or categories of potential committee members. With respect to the rest, I think I'd have to see what passed by this council before I could give you a good date, either end of January if it's simplistic, or end of February if not so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, either way, we before we discuss this any further, the motion's on the floor and we need a seconder. I'm sorry, to the town clerk.
I just wanted to make sure, Mr. Mayor, through you, that I am clear on Councillor Olson's motion. Councillor Olson, I was listening to your comments, and what I understand is that the motion before council would be it resolved that council refer the matter back to staff to further revise the proposed terms of reference to include soil preservation matters and to promote agricultural jobs and businesses, and that staff report back to council by February 21st, 2023. Is that what you're looking for, Councillor Olson? Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the clerk, what I was looking for was a review of the terms of reference. And I was looking for a review of what the committee is going to consist of. And prepared to listen to suggestions on my own part, but those were suggestions, and I agree with the idea of simplifying it, but I also agree with the need to follow some kind of a pattern for the membership, and I think it's important to look at the rural Ontario regulations and suggestions and guidelines for agricultural committees.
Okay, so it's to return the terms of reference back to staff for further review. And specifically, you're only asking to mention the membership criteria and the Ontario Rural Affairs. Sorry, was that a best practice guide?
Yeah, it's and I think it's OMAFRA has the other rules that can be referenced as well.
So not to specifically reference the soil preservation or promote the agricultural jobs and businesses.
No.
Okay, and then to return it.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. To you, Mr. Mayor, that's the motion being put forward by Councillor Olson. Councillor Olson would need a seconder.
Okay, is there a seconder for this? Councillor Hildebrand?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, correct. Because I agree with Councillor Kerr's generalization, the elimination of specificity for the groups, and get the wording right and get the report back by the end of January. That's
Okay, thank you. And now then we can debate these the changes. So we're number one, the number one thing, we're going to defer this. Number two, we'll ask staff to go back and write either a more detailed terms of reference or adding these items that Councillor Olson has brought up, or you don't agree with it and you vote against the motion. So what's any comments on the motion? And we see Councillor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I think we can resolve this fairly simply. I hate like heck to see this deferred. You know, if we're going to be 2 months down the road again,
Exactly.
who knows what we're going to do with this. I like Councillor Niznik's suggestion, just wordsmithing that one line and just change it to may include these types of occupations, agricultural occupations, and leave it at that, and then we can approve this thing tonight. But I don't see the need to punt it back to staff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wink. Councillor Cavan or Councillor Kerr?
I agree with Councillor Wink. Let's get this thing moving. We can refine it as we go. We can create better things. There's wording in that. As a former employee of the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Food and Rural Affairs for over 18 years, I'm very familiar with how they operate and the things that they put forward. I'm more than willing, as Councillor Niznik has suggested the word may, that just opens everything up. We can wordsmith it when we get to the advertising, but at least the committee's in place. I think it's critical to get this committee up and running. To lose 30 days, 60 days, probably 90 days by the time a first meeting could be held is just basically booting things down the road. So that's all I'll say relative to that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kerr, thank you. Any other comments at this time? I know I have some, but I'll go last. I don't see anyone else, so I will make my comments. I have talked during my campaign. I talked to various people who expressed an interest on this because they were concerned agriculture being excluded from any town bylaws that would be coming down the pipe. I got the express feeling from the people that they wanted us to keep it simple. They didn't talk about getting into huge aspects of farming, agriculture. It's a huge business unto itself, that if you want to start going down all these tentacles, it'd be quite a committee, and they would be meeting every week. So like I say, I think at this point, I will vote against this, because I would like to see this committee up and running. And I want to, as a farmer, my motto has always been keep it simple. And there's the other word, but I won't say that. So that's how I look at this. Let's keep it simple, get it up and running, and make changes on the fly. That's one thing we can do, is be mobile, be fluid as we go along. So those are my words. Any other comments before we call the vote? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. So just for clarity, this is the motion to refer it back to staff to make changes and to report back by February 21st, put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. And the vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
No.
Councillor Kerr.
No.
Councillor Niznik.
No.
Councillor Eckhart.
No.
Mayor Junkin.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's been defeated. We go back to the main motion originally presented, and if council wishes, an amendment can be brought forward.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Niznik.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we amend the wording on the bullet that says 6 residents who are involved in the agricultural industry, including, and change that to say 6 residents who are involved in the agricultural industry, which may include the following groups as examples, or
Perfect.
does that sound okay? Something to that effect?
Yeah.
Colby?
How about which may include, comma, but not be limited to,
Yes.
There we go. Thank you very
semicolon,
much.
and then you can keep the rest of the language.
I like that. Thank you so much.
That's why we pay
That's my
him.
motion.
That's why we pay him the big bucks. Yes.
What a guy.
I thought it was my rugged good looks. Who knew?
Okay. Any other comments on this amendment? Obviously, to the amendment, or amendments to be made, I guess I should say. It seems that Councillor Nesnick has indeed, with the help of the CEO, made the what's noted to be the appropriate change. Not seeing any other. So, Madam Clerk, do we need a seconder on this amendment or not?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, we would need a seconder. I just want to make sure I have the language correct. It's that council directs staff to amend the proposed terms of reference to broaden the membership requirements to state 6 residents in the commercial agricultural industry, which may include but not limited to. I wasn't sure, sorry, Councillor Niznik, if you said the commercial agricultural industry, if we're just using agricultural industry.
Yes, I did. I didn't include commercial, the word
Okay, so
commercial
I'll remove
here.
that. Thank you. We would be looking for a seconder.
Councillor Eckert, you will second?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any further debate on the amendment? Not seeing any, we shall call the vote, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The amendment carries. That brings you to the main motion as amended. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any other discussion.
Okay, thank you. One last time, any further discussion?
Yes.
Oh, Councillor Kerr?
Yeah, just point of clarification, and I spoke with the clerk about this. They talked about bi-monthly meetings, and if you look in the dictionary, bi-monthly can be twice a month or every other month. And she had indicated to me that it was intended to be every other month. So as long as it's clarified in the wording, that would be great.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I consider that to be a minor administrative change to clarify the intention, and I've included language, something along the lines of bracket to be met every other month, 6 times per month or something along those lines.
6 times per year.
6 times per year, perhaps. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Kerr,
Yes.
Councillor Niznik,
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, we're on our next item of business. And I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2023-0015, recommendation for application for zoning bylaw amendment AM 08 2022-1114 Hayes Street. And that council directs staff to prepare the bylaw to amend the zoning of the residential 284 R2-284 zone to permit a rear yard setback of 7.5 meters, maximum lot coverage of 55%, and encroachment of 3.5 meters for a covered porch for council's consideration. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Excellent. So council, of course, we realize that that is on the old arena site. We had that presentation last month, I believe. Any other comments or questions on this report? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Kerr,
Yes.
Councillor Niznik,
Yes.
Councillor Olson,
Yes.
Councillor Wink,
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart,
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt,
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. Thank you. To you, Mr. Mayor. We're on our next item of business, and I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that council receive memo update to planning report 2022-0252, rural hens licensing bylaw for information, and that council receive report 2022-0252, rural hens licensing bylaw for information, and that council direct planning and bylaw staff to prepare the bylaw to permit, regulate, and license rural hens in the town of Pelham. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any comments, questions on this 10.2.4 item on the agenda? Councilor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just one question with respect to lot size. 60 by 100 size lot seems a little small to have a chicken coop and a chicken run. I'll refer to the planning department to ask how that particular lot size came about.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Lawak, are you there? Oh, or is it perhaps Lindsay? Is that your particular expertise?
That is. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wink, with regards to the size of the lots, we sort of went with that, and it's 18 meters by about 30 meters in lot depth. It was suggested, and this bylaw, I have to specify, is dealing specifically with rural properties.
And give it to the
and so this was being suggested because there are a number of rural residential lots that are sort of around that size. But we certainly could entertain a larger lot size than what's being recommended. And hopefully that would accommodate, the majority of the smaller lots that are in the rural area.
Yeah, so my comment would be we're trying to include everybody, but there's some practicality involved in this that, sometimes this doesn't fit a lot. And, I'd like to see the lot size be a little larger.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Any other comments at this time? I see Counselor Kerr.
Personally, I think that the writing of this in the draft form that I've seen at this point is a little premature. I've been digging through a number of municipalities looking at or bylaws and other things that have been written in other jurisdictions. They're all over the map. We had a presentation earlier today in which a number of people who are requesting the urban fowl wish to be part of the process and be part of the decision-making and coming up with guidelines. We have very few guidelines in here. I didn't notice any comment about restriction of free-range chickens. The setbacks relative to the rear lot and the side lots are extremely small compared to other bylaws in other areas. I think we need to find the happy medium, and it would also somewhat go to what Councillor Wink has brought up about lot sizes. This being the case, and I think getting a chance to bring the community into it that are, let's say, heavily involved in personal poultry, as we call it, that to be honest, my position at this point is to defer this to the future, that there's additional information that needs to be collected, as well as input from additional individuals at this time. This is not to say that staff hasn't done due diligence, but there are other avenues of expertise I think that we could also tap into to assist them, especially anticipating that you have, in looking at it, a comment came out about avian issues. The predominant transfer of avian flu is from wild birds to domesticated birds in an open environment. This particular situation then would indicate that you would want to have a chicken coop and chicken run that was not just with sides, but would have to have a roof on it. It could be strictly fencing, but to restrict wild birds from entering into the situation for transmission. So these are the kind of things that I think need to be looked at in further detail, as well as the licensing requirements used in other areas. The group that's approached and sent all of us numerous letters have indicated that they're in support of it, but they've also indicated that there needs to be a substantial series of guidelines established for it. And I am supportive of that. If we're going to entertain urban chickens, and specifically urban chickens, that we need to make sure we get everything right and make sure that it fits, as Councillor Wink has brought up, the environments that we're looking at. The people having the chickens themselves, they're always for it. We also have to consider next door neighbors that may not be as poultry friendly, that we don't have to put them into a position where we have to have one neighbor taking on another neighbor with regards to various items. And that's what I don't want to get into, is making this one person gets in and the other one gets left behind approach.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Eckert.
I agree with the comments that have been made. I can tell you that right from the start of my campaign and announced that I was running, my position was, after researching this, I've always been in favor of a licensed accommodation to allow people to have chickens in the urban area. However, I do agree that we need to get this absolutely right, or as close to perfect as possible. I'm wondering at this time, Mr. Mayor, if staff we can refer this back to staff, but also what about the possibility of input from our newly established agricultural committee?
Let me go to the senior planner, Ms. Lalak. Is there anything here that is that would be time sensitive, keeping in mind that the ag committee, you would be the expert on this, but wouldn't be going till what, the middle of February? Is there any problem with that, or when do you, first of all, after seeing what council has decided on the Ag Committee, when do you visualize the Ag Committee being up and running? Or should that be for the CAO? Maybe let's go to the CAO. Thank you.
Sure.
So we have advertisements up for all town committees as we speak. We have had for, I want to say 2 weeks. I think we put them up a few days prior to Christmas. And they will remain up for another week or two, depending. And then some will remain up until such time as we get an adequate number of applicants. So that's where we currently stand. We will add the Agricultural Advisory Committee tomorrow in light of this evening's vote. So realistically, council, assuming we got a lot of applicants right away, at your next meeting, you're scheduled to go in closed session to review the applications and go through that process. It's possible that you'll have enough applications for ag in that relatively short period of time that you can make that decision then. And if not, they'll need a couple more weeks. All the other committees had longer. At any rate, for sake of argument, if on January 30th you were to approve the membership for the Agricultural Advisory Committee, it won't meet till sometime in February, and it's not fair to expect any group on its first night of existence to be able to offer you any policy, and particularly if it wants to hear some input from various community groups. Realistically, I don't think you're going to get any response until April, any meaningful advice back from that group, because surely it needs to get its feet under it, and then even if that is the first item of business, it should hear from all groups who want to hear, who want some input, and do whatever research on its own that it wishes to. So I take no issue with the idea of referring this to an Agricultural Advisory Committee. This would be something that would fall under its purview. That being said, I don't think anything prior to April is realistic. Now, that being said, there is no law here. You don't have to create exemptions, or you can, and we can take as long or as short as we wish with where we're going. You are in complete control of this process. You can choose to delegate to take advice from the Agriculture Advisory Committee, but at the end of the day, it will only be advice. The decision-making power rests with the 7 of you, and that won't change. So assuming it is your will to refer this, I would anticipate hearing something in April. And then based on that, you will or won't like the advice. You will give staff directions to amend the draft bylaw to include things the committee says and recommends. Some of them, all of them, as the case may be. And then realistically, we'll get something on the books in May. That's what I would think would be realistic. If Ms. Richardson, Ms. LaRocque, or Ms. Wilford have additional thoughts, I'm partially thinking on the fly, but please correct me or add commentary if I've missed anything. Thank you.
Okay. Before I go to Ms. Richardson, I would just like to perhaps be a little disappointed in your timeline. Knowing the members of the agricultural community as I do, I think we can do a little bit better than April, sir. But we shall leave that up to the committee. Okay, Ms. Richardson, any comments on the Mr. CAOs?
To you, Mr. Mayor, no comments on that. I believe the clerk maybe had a hand up.
Okay.
I also have a question for council, but I will wait for the clerk to.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to say I concurred with Mr. Cribbs's timeline. Certainly, the clerk's department will endeavor to have the advertisement up tomorrow. If we have enough applications, we will bring that to council's consideration for January 30th. So there's a potential for that committee to be established at that point in time. However, this committee is meeting bi-monthly. So if their first meeting was in February, they would skip March, and then their second meeting would potentially be in April. So I think that the April timeline, is an actual possibility. However, that is just my commentary. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
While we have you on the floor, Madam Clerk, if the committee so decides that the item before them is of grave community concern, could they indeed meet more than once every 2 months? And I see Mr. Go
Yes.
ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, certainly any committee can, the terms of reference are built in so that a meeting can be called by the chair at any time. So certainly it is a possibility for the committee to meet more frequently, yes.
Okay, we'll just leave it at that. Excellent. Then now we're back to you, Ms. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 2 points, one for clarification, and this may come out of the resolution that comes from this, but what I'm hearing is that this council would like us to potentially revisit the permission of hens within the urban area. So that was something that we looked at last year and was kaput. So I just want to make sure that that is the correct intent. The second piece is that we would want to consult with the public as well. The April timeline would be fine for that.
Okay, thank you. And now I'll go back to the Mr. CAO. Do we have to do a reconsideration on this?
So I don't want us to get too distracted in the weeds right now. You don't even have anyone who's volunteered or applied to sit on a committee. So we're just talking about a theoretical. Yeah. Also, and I say this with fullest of respect, the Cannabis Control Committee that served the previous council made very strong recommendations and going forward in the future around the issue of lighting and greenhouses and dark skies. And it could be that this new group who, and I don't know who I'm talking about because we have no applicants as yet, may want to prioritize that unless this council dictates to them this is to be their priority issue. So I don't think we should be having a big conversation around timelines when it'll be we'll be relying on volunteers who may prioritize other issues ahead of this one. This council has already determined that it does not want to allow chickens in urban areas, and staff were directed to bring back a bylaw that only dealt with potentially allowing chickens in rural areas. So we have all the power in the world to take as long as we wish to come up with I can't remember which of you said close to perfect. It was either Councillor Kerr or Councillor Eckhart, getting it close to perfect. And we can take as much time as we wish to with that with respect to rural. But it's certainly, and Madam Clerk can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the motion language, like you have already made a decision in urban areas. So if you wish to reverse that, that would require reconsideration, which is to say a super majority of you, so at least 5. Madam Clerk, did I get any part of that wrong?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would want to revisit what the motion was that was passed at that meeting just to make sure. However, certainly if council made a decision, then there is a possibility for a reconsideration, which is a super majority. So I would want to just revisit that and refresh my memory. But
the thing is that need not be the concern of an advisory committee. That's a procedural thing that Madam Clerk and I and the town solicitor can most certainly help and guide you through if or when we come across that bridge. Really what we'd want to hear is the position and the advice of agricultural experts from the community of Pelham on this issue. So it would come back to you at a time they feel they've got the best advice for you. I don't want to say when that is. They do have the capacity to, as the Cannabis Control Committee did, at various points in time, they increased their meetings to weekly. And then at other points in time, we went 3 months without a meeting and we just sort of reacted to where we were in a process. And I think this would be in a very appropriate time. This committee might start with a whole bunch of meetings in the late winter, early spring, and then reduce down into what we thought is a default every other month. But maybe every other month isn't enough, or maybe it's too often. I mean, ultimately the group will determine that for itself. So while it's been an excellent discussion, I don't think that should be what guides any decisions you make at the moment. I think the good discussion is, do you refer this? And there seemed to be at least some will amongst the group for that, and that's the decision point you should make. And then thereafter, let's wait and see what comes back. All I can say is that you all planning staff probably my office and quite possibly clerk staff assisting that group with the process and with coming up with recommendations in a usable form for you.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So until we, if indeed we have to do a consideration, then the status quo is in effect. Is that correct, Mr. CAO?
That's correct. Currently, the town bylaw prohibits farm animals in land that's not zoned for farm animals. It's in very plain English. I managed, neither of our planners sort of got their backs up at that. So that was none of the technical language, but as a practical matter, you cannot have urban chickens or ducks or geese or guinea fowl, etc. So that's the law as it currently stands in this community. And unless or until council seeks to change that, that will remain the case.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Eckert.
Yeah, just so I'm clear on this, I am in favor, and I would bring a motion forward at the appropriate time to revisit this decision of not allowing in the urban area. So I just want that made very clear. And I would rely on the advice of the clerk and the CAO as to when that I should bring that motion forward.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Mr. CEO, I take it the next meeting's at the earliest. And any other comments?
Look, you've approved the creation of an agricultural advisory committee. We will or won't be able to create one on January 30th. If not, you'll create one sometime in February. They will come back to you with advice on the topic. And look, the advice might be don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Or the advice might be do. I have no idea what the advice will be. Then you will or won't take that advice. And at that point in time, Councillor Eckert, so some months from now, we will put the matter before this group, and that would be an appropriate time for a reconsideration, depending on what the advice is and depending on whether the advice changes your opinion, of course.
Right.
But we're talking about months from now. At the moment, the questions are: you can refer the item. You have at the moment you've requested staff to bring you work product. Ms. Richardson, the primary author, although I think everyone in planning's touched it. We have complied. There's work product before you now. You have to decide what, if anything, you're going to do with it. You could simply receive and file it. You could refer the matter to the new Agricultural Advisory Committee. You could endorse what's been written, although I gather there's not widespread support for that at the moment. I'd like to see additional changes. So if I'm reading the room correctly, you'd want to refer the matter to the advisory committee. And if you refer it to the advisory committee, you could ask them for input by, or for, their advice by May 30th. You pick a date, not for me to say, or you could just refer it without a date. It is a new group, as you prefer. And I think that would be an effective referral.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Nesnick.
Yeah, so now that we've kind of gone around the merry-go-round, and let's come back to the subject, which is rural hens licensing bylaws. So this is for the rural area, not in the urban boundaries, my understanding. So the reason this came forward was because currently you had to have 10 acres or more in order to be eligible to have these. And the previous council felt that if you live on a fairly large property, or you live on a 60 by 100 piece of property with neighbors who also have a large lot, say they may have 3 acres and you just happen to have a little small lot along Balfour Road, for instance, and you're in the rural area, would it be okay with town council if we allowed those folks and families to have rural hens? So that's how this all came about. So I think staff have done a really fine job kind of outlining that. At first too, my thought was, that seems like a little bit of a small property, but if you're in the rural area and you've got that size property and then your neighbors beside you have 3 acres, well, then it's really not such a small area after all. But as you said, that's the question there. Is that yard too small, or should we change it and maybe make it 1 to 5 acres, or a minimum of 1 acre or hectare piece of property? And then the other one was that it says about not selling eggs. So I'm just curious that if someone who has between more than 5 hectares, or is it acres or hectares? I'm not sure, but they could have up to 20 hens. Well, that's a lot of chicken eggs. So I'm not sure what folks would do with all those chicken eggs, but I guess they'd figure it out to share it with the neighbors. So I'm not sure, but I think as it was written and as we had directed staff to do, I think they did a fine job. So I'm fine to move forward with what the 2 recommendations are at this point.
Okay, thank you. So, Madam Clerk, we can indeed, obviously kind of 2 reports here. We will just, we can concentrate on the rural tonight, and then urban will be discussed in detail on another day, whether that be 3 or 4 months away. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, right now you have the reports in front of you for information and directing staff to bring forth the bylaw at the next meeting. I know council is considering potentially referring the matter to the Agricultural Committee to bring its own recommendations, and that's with respect to the rural hens licensing aspect. If council desires to revisit the urban hens, I will be re-looking at that motion passed. I think it was in October, and I'll be able to provide council some guidance and advice how to potentially bring that matter back. Of course, I'll discuss that with Mr. Cribbs as well. So right now it's the rural hens, and I think council needs to determine whether or not they wish to refer the matter to the newly established Agricultural Committee, or if you do in fact want to deal with that today.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cribbs,
Mr. CAO?
The one piece of advice I would like to give this council is don't split it, because you could end up with the absurdity of very different results. So I would not pass a bylaw tonight that only deals with the rural area and refer urban to an agricultural advisory committee, individuals who by definition don't live urban, by the by. I would refer the whole topic over, because ultimately, whatever we land on, we want to, assuming we land on some sort of regime and assuming there's going to be some sort of licensing as part of that, for sake of argument, we'd like some logical coherence and consistency. So I would not both pass a bylaw tonight and then refer the topic over the Ag Advisory Committee. I would either refer it over or I'd pass it tonight. But you kind of want to end up with something that has logical cohesion. And the best way to do that is to either refer it all or say, well, we've just done with the one issue and we're just dealing with the other.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kerr?
I agree with the CAO. Instinctively looking at this, you're talking an 18 meter by 30 meter lot is such a small fraction of an acre in the rural environment. Finding those lots that are that small are few and far between. I think we don't want to create rural urban friction by having one set of rules saying you need a substantially larger piece of land or whatever for the certain number of chickens. I think we have to have some degree of consistency, but I think it needs to be an all-in-one, that here are the urban rules and rural rules at the same time, very simplistically. That's just my own personal view. I think we're starting to write rules for the rural people and writing rules for the urban people, and it's now going to create havoc.
Although obviously, Councillor Kerr, you will obviously agree that the rural people will be able to should have larger numbers if they so wish, if indeed they're like you say, the lot you're saying in a rural area, 18 by whatever that is, I don't even believe that exists in the rural, because it's most severances or a 1 acre lot minimal. So obviously, maybe somewhere in the town, there is an 18 by something in the rural area, but whatever. Obviously, when we get talking rural, we are talking bigger distances, and obviously, the bigger the lot, bigger the acreage. Somebody with 40 acres, obviously, I'm hoping we're not going to say, well, the maximum chickens you're going to have is 5 or 6. I mean, whatever. Anyway, I also agree with the CEO and with Councillor Kerr that we should be keeping this all as one and bringing it back for a rainy day. And people should not, at this time, be putting any eggs in the incubator. Any other comments on this? The motion has been to refer this to the Councillor Eckert. Did you put that forward as a motion? I'm sorry.
I think someone else did. I didn't think it was me. I was just talking about, yeah, Madam Clerk.
Yeah, we'll go to the Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I have been listening for a formal mover, although it seems there may be support. I haven't heard any councillor put their name forth to bring this motion to refer the matter to the Agricultural Advisory Committee. So if that is council's desire, we would be needing a mover and a seconder.
Okay, Councillor Eckert.
I'll move that.
Mover.
Sure.
Okay, and Councillor Kerr, would you remove a second?
second it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, to Mr. Mayor. So it would be to referring the matter to the Agricultural Advisory Committee, and that council would direct the Agricultural Advisory Committee to provide recommendations to council with respect to hens. I put also bracket urban and rural because it appears that council wants both to be reviewed. And is there a date that council wants that back by?
It doesn't sound like we should be encumbering the Ag Committee with a date at this time. Maybe as soon as possible. I don't know, Mr. CAO, any wording on that date line?
Well, I'm not sure what the will of council would be. So sorry, I'm hesitant to recommend something. You may wish to let the committee go at its own pace.
Okay.
That seems like a reasonable thing. There'll be a number of people watching this and deciding whether they want to put their names forward to that committee. So
okay.
Why don't we let them decide? They know it's an important issue for the community, and I'm sure it'll get some amount of prioritization.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, then we will leave it. We will leave the timeline open then, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any further discussion on the referral of the of this to the about to be formed Agricultural Committee? Any further discussion? Not seeing any. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, I would highly encourage, and I think we're all of the ilk, that the Ag Subcommittee would, because it's going to cover urban and rural, have a meeting such that they would encourage the urban advocates to come in and provide comment at an open meeting. I think it's critical to have their input relative to what they perceive as valuable guidelines for an urban environment.
Yep, and yeah, thanks for bringing that, pointing that out, Councillor, because all committee meetings are indeed open to the public, and yes, would be a great idea for having them advertise when they're meeting and looking for input from the urban and from the rural people as far as that goes.
Sure.
Excellent, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. So this is the motion to refer to the Agricultural Advisory Committee, and the vote begins with Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry, and the matter will be referred. To you, Mr. Mayor, we're on our next item of business, which is the presentation and consideration of bylaws.
Oh, wait, please, Madam Clerk, if I may. Can we go on? There was a certain item I wanted to talk to at the beginning of the meeting, right after we did the land acknowledgement. And then I had that little glitch. And it is an announcement that I would like to make. If I could put it under unfinished business, perhaps, and with council's indulgence, if I may. I just had a note from a great organization in this town, Pelham Cares. They just wanted council to know that they greatly appreciated the use of the MCC as a drop-off point during their food collection drive. And at the MCC, they collected 13,000 pounds of food, and the area schools collected 17,000 pounds of food. So they were very, just wanted to make sure that these numbers got out to the community. And again, they wanted to send a big thank you to this council and town staff for the use of the MCC. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Of course, Mr. Mayor, I have so noted that announcement. I do have a motion being put forth by Councillor Kerr, seconded by Councillor Eckhart. Be it resolved that the Council for the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaw, do read first, second, and third time and pass same, and that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. 1. Bylaw 01/2023, being a bylaw to provide for an interim tax levy for the year 2023. 2. Bylaw 02-2023, being a bylaw to confirm various appointments to statutory committees of the Town of Pelham for the 2022 to 2026 term of council, and to repeal and replace bylaw 4068/2019 as amended. 3. Bylaw 03-2023, being a bylaw to appoint a deputy mayor for a term of 2 years commencing on January 9th, 2023 and ending on January 9th, 2025, or such other date on which a successor is appointed, and repeal and replace bylaw number 4054/2018 as amended. 4. Bylaw 04/2023, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1136/1987 as amended for lands located at 1145 Pelham Street, legally described as Block 13, Registered Plan 59M 405, Town of Pelham, Regional Municipality of Niagara, from the General Commercial 89 Zone to a Site-Specific Residential Multiple 289 Zone, file number AM 06/2022. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Any discussion on any of these bylaws? And not seeing any hands, Madam Clerk?
Great, Mr. Mayor, thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to notices of motions and motions. We do have a notice of motion being put forth by Councillor Niznik. To you, Mr. Mayor, if she wishes to speak on that motion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Niznik, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So just a little background, Councillor Eckhart and myself were asked to meet with residents who live along Port Robinson Road and or in the newer subdivisions that access Port Robinson Road, just with continued concerns over traffic speeds going mostly east on Port Robinson Road as they leave Station Street area. So they stop quickly at Station Street or do a roll through stop there, who knows? And then, you know, kind of floor it until they get down to Rice Road. So just wondering, I did email Mr. Marr, and he did respond to my email saying that they're too conscious and aware that there is some traffic concerns along that road. And just wondering if there is anything, because, you know, it's going to be a little while before that area gets totally built out. If there is something we could ask staff to investigate, to look to see if there's something we could do to help with the reduction of speeds along that area. even if it's a Band-Aid solution until those roads get flushed out. I know you did put a stop sign at the end of Summersize that comes out onto Station Street. So now there's a 4-way stop there. And I realize that road's getting redone too. So just wondering if there would be some sort of something that staff could investigate helping out our residents there along there.
If I may, Madam Clerk, as a notice of motion, this is getting a little detailed as for notice of motion, or am I wrong in that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it isn't intended for the counselor to indicate the intention of what they're looking for and what the motion itself will state at the next meeting. So I think it's okay to give staff an idea and the public the idea of what will be looked for.
Okay, thank you. We turn then to Director of Public Works, Mr. Moore.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So understanding the councilor's request, staff are aware that there are some speeding issues on the section of road. We've installed 2 speed indicator signs. That was at the request of the last council. Those have been installed. There's a lot to unpack, and staff can definitely bring forward a report or some type of information to council with respect to some options available. The development is still proceeding. Final surface works on that road won't be completed until such time that development is built out. And really that's the time when we would be able to implement some, I guess, more concrete, if you want to say that, solutions for traffic calming. Port Robinson Road is a heavily traveled section of roadway. It sees about 3,500 cars a day on that section of road, and it is classified as one of our collector arterial type roads. So the design of that section of roadway is to move traffic. That is the intent of that type of road. It's to move vehicles and pedestrians and traffic in and out of the downtown area and between the residential neighborhoods. We have installed stop controlled intersections before. I know there are some intersections along this stretch of road between Station Street and Rice Road where there are new interchanges, new intersections, and intersecting points. Staff have done in the past where we've done intersection warrant studies to determine if a stop controlled intersection is justified and warranted. That's something that staff could undertake to get that information and data to present that to council. And one thing I do caution is that you mentioned the slow rolling stops. When there are intersections, and specifically stop controlled intersections placed at intersections that aren't warranted, that's what you tend to get. You tend to get traffic not obeying the stop signs, and then it really comes down to an enforcement issue. So it's unfortunately the town of Pelham, we have limited resources with respect to enforcement within the town, but it is an enforcement issue with respect to people not stopping at stop signs, people speeding. I will direct the public council to our website. We do have a direct link to the NRP for speeding complaints. In addition, in the previous council passed a traffic calming policy. So that's well identified on our website as well. And there's steps to go through that process for the community to get and implement traffic calming measures on roads within the urban area. So that's also an option that we can explore. Again, lots to unpack, and if Councillor Niznik wants to bring a motion forward to get more information, the staff would be more than happy to follow up on that direction and get some information for council to consider.
Hey, thank you, Director of Public Works. We'll go back to Councillor Niznik first.
Councillor Niznik, you are muted.
guess I was unmuted before. So yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Maher. That's helpful. If we could move forward then with a motion for that to happen. I also just am not sure if, or council's ideas about, and this wouldn't be Mr. Maher, but this would be maybe our communications department, starting to look at some sort of community awareness and blitz with regards to, this is your community, your safety. Go ahead, Holly. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Over the course of the next 2 weeks, staff will be very happy to start working on a draft motion. Councilor Niznik, for your review and consideration. And certainly that's the type of input that we would be looking for you. So certainly I've heard that, and I can make sure that that's in the draft that we present you. And over the next week and a half, we'll work with yourself on that motion that will be presented in full on the next at the next meeting.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Eckert on this one. Go ahead, Councillor.
If this motion from Councillor Niznik needs a seconder, I will be happy to second that, and I will keep comments on this issue to a later date when it comes forward.
Yes, and at this point, a seconder is not required, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. Over the course of the next week and a half to 2 weeks, I'll work with Councillor Niznik, and she'll advise of the seconder, and we certainly send the seconder a copy of that draft motion prior to it being placed on the agenda in full as well, just to get the seconder's confirmation as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. Back to you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that brings us to our next item of business, which is the confirming bylaw. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrandt, seconded by Councillor Niznik. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be ready first, second, and third time and passed, being a bylaw number 05/2023 to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council for the town of Pelham at its regular meeting held on the 9th day of January 2023. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any discussion.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this bylaw? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. To you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Niznik, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be resolved that this regular meeting be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for January 30th, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. To you, Mr. Mayor, for any discussion.
Any further discussion from council? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Eckhart.
Just before I vote, I wanted to comment on the mayor's comment. If he's referring to my ability to carry drywall, then yes, I'm an excellent drywaller. Other than that, that's my limitation, and I vote yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes.
Councillor Niznik.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That carries. It is 7:41 p.m. and you can gavel out your meeting.
Okay,